Greetings, friends of 4X strategy. In this video, I will present to you brand new content for Galactic Civilizations 4. Just give me a second, I need to delve a little further into this DOS game from the 90s until I get lost again. Ascendancy. Is this even a game, I wonder? Or do we gaze upon the first modern art gallery in a game's disguise? And look at these strange yellow space warps. What?
We must inherit the will of Tanandam, our great savior, and return to the Great Passage.
But you haven't returned since 1995. There's no sequel of Ascendancy Dos-Game, right?
With your help, we shall return and face the evil of Barisha.
Okay, let's give it a try and guide these Swaparamans through the darkness, shall we? With some fresh new 4X strategy game like Galactic Civilizations 4. 30 years I've waited for this, but today is the day. Today we will resurrect a spacefaring species from the long-forgotten 4X game Ascendancy Dos-Game 1995 and make it playable in Galactic Civilizations 4. To achieve this, we will use the game Spore from 2006. Lots of XML code, a music production software, Canva, and of course the GalCiv-4 ship design. You may jump to the different chapters in the description, but I will start with step number 1. Respect the origin. When you came from other 4X games like Master of Orion, Civilization, Age of Wonders, Alpha Centauri or GalCiv, and you encounter Ascendancy for the first time, you will be surprised by the looks of it. The design approach is probably the most unique in all 4X history. You won't find another game like this. There are 21 species with unique portrayal, lore and ship design. Let me introduce to you the resourceful Swaparamans. Swaparamans evolved in a dual system with a star in the black hole along with their distant relatives, the telekinetic fruit marker. The dual star configuration influenced the development of structures that continually built in the minds of Swaparamans, like electricity charging a capacitor. The fruit marker once drove most of Swaparamans from their homeworld. I assume they even sacrificed the Swaparamans to their black hole god Gravesha. A tiny number of Swaparamans were able to flee their homeworld under the guidance of Tanandanam. The Swaparamans survived the dangerous passage through space by using their energy storing capabilities. Now our goal is to implement the species in Galactic Civilizations 4. Let's build an appearance first to make these portraits for leaders, advisors and citizens. And for this step we will use Spore. Yes, Spore, you heard correctly. And you will soon understand why. In the Spore game, there's a species designer which will help us making a template for the Swaparaman species. We will focus on the overall shape and the core features. We need a worm-like creature with 2 heads, a spiral neck and arms and fingers. Quite yellow and cartoonish with strange appendages. In contrast to the Snowvemdoma species I made in the last episode, this one is much more complicated because of the twisted and unusual anatomy. But finally, I am quite content with the shape. So let's add a paint job and make it look as yellow as possible. Finally, we switch to the test run to make a few photos from multiple different angles. The pictures are now in my Spore folder and we can progress to the next step. I will use Canva to enhance them. For this step I will include very restricted usage of AI. And yes, it is very limited. It has to be, because otherwise the AI would ruin the whole figure. The AI is told to keep the shape and to stick strongly to my template. So basically what it will do is for the most part texture, color and lighting. The results you can see here are only possible because of the creature I designed in Spore. Without the template, you wouldn't recognize the species. The AI would simply show what it was trained on from the pre-existing creations of various artists. Now we create different sizes of these images for leaders, thumbnails and citizens. The leader images for the menu and diplomacy screen are 16:9, the other images are square format. And with first assets being created, a costume mod folder shall be created as well, and we name it Ascendancy. To later warp these portraits into the game, we shall engineer those XML files. I won't go into every detail here. If you are interested in the XML, please write it in the comments and I will share it to you. The next asset we shall create for our Swaparamans is some costume faction music, starting with a short introduction track for the main menu and diplomacy screen. Additionally, a music track will play during the opening story event. For getting into the vibe of the Swaparamans, I would, in most cases, stick to the core elements of the original soundtrack from 1995. Let us listen closely to the original composed by Nenad Uglinek and pay it proper respect anyway. You can hear a deep synthesizer for the bass notes and a high one which does the melody. In between you can hear these funky lap sounds, probably an effect chain which repeats a pitched up echo note over and over again. This theme gets a sad and emotional vibe done, and at the same time it has an energetic sprinkling sound to it. And despite of the fact that I actually like that track very much, I will take a different path and give the Swaparamans a much more spiritual and enlightened touch along with elements of Indian raga music. In the lore section I will explain the reasons. We will start with a constant stream of dark but radiant bass notes. My approach will include low strings, flange tamburas and synthesizer. In the midst there are several pads of slightly heroic and hopeful sounding string and choir pads, along with an electrifying buzzing sound. Now I will craft a slow melody orchestrated with string instruments, flutes, sitar and tambura. To keep it moving, I add a counterpoint melody which also includes percussion instruments like marimba, harp, vibes and different synthes. A very important element for getting the vibe done is a playful drum pattern of light conga and bongo sounds. Now this is our result. Please give it a short listen. You will wonder why I moved into this ethnic Indian direction so hardly, and I will tell you in a minute. But for now, let me assure you that Tanandam will probably smile upon this decision. But we will go even further. I will create a second track with similar instruments, but longer melodies and pads, which creates the feeling of movement in space. This track shall play for the costume event and for hostile diplomatic stands when you meet the Swaparamans as a different faction. To implement the music tracks into the game, we also have to create another 4 XMLs. If you are interested in the details of costume music implementation, please put it down in the comments. Thank you so far for having this deep dive into portraits and music with me. The next chapter will be the creation of a costume star system, names and flavor text. We don't have an overboarding amount of background lore for the Swaparamans, but what we have is in itself consistent and special. So every single word and every detail is important. We have the name of Tanandam, the wise leader who led the Swaparamans through the darkness, and the name of the species itself, Swaparamans. We do also have the name of their arch-enemies, the Fruit Maca, and their black hole god, Gravesha. We do also know that Swaparamans focus on the storage and release of energy, while Fruitmaker focus on mass or gravitation. What we must do now is to search for cultural reference on our own planet Earth for these names or something similar, and we are successful. Indian Sanskrit has enough similarities to be valid as a baseline for the creation of a xeno-cultural framework. Apadaman could mean the infinite. Fruitmaker, on the other hand, are probably bodies of burden or heaviness. Gravesha is of course a reference to the elephant god Ganesha. Tanandam is a familiar sounding name which could refer to a son of someone. With this knowledge we can create our own fancy Xeno-Sanskrit names and swap a few letters to make them sound alien enough. Therefore our homeworld will have the name Nandanavana, which is the holy garden, the promised land, which Tanandam once found. The leader name shall be Nandanavana, keeper of Nandanavana. For our solar system, we will use the Terran system as a starting point and exchange the names of our Roman gods with Indian spiritual words. For example, Mars becomes Virananda and Venus becomes Premanidi. Adityananda will be the name of our star, and for the citizen names, we will create a few dozens like Anantara. We will turn the star Adityananda into a blue star and add a few thulium moons. That brings a bluish bright glow into our system and reflects the Swaparamans' affinity to energy and light. The Swaparamans' homeworld, Nandanavana, will be a class 30 jungle planet. We implement all this by configuring these 5 XML files in our mod directory. For the planet of Premanidi, we will configure a special colonization override event which will unlock the construction of the Tanandam battery. Last but not least, we will add some really unique flavor to this faction by implementing this Costum Planetary improvement and flavor text alongside. The Tanandam battery building on the game mechanic side will reflect the great energy storage capabilities of Swaparamans and increase the ship range for every level of the battery. More important, however, the Tanandam battery unlocks the production for a special project on the capital planet. At the expense of 1 antimatter, Swaparamans can build 1 quantum battery charge. The construction of this battery charge will trigger the generation of 1 artifact power in your vault. The activation of this power will reset the moves of a whole fleet. On the lore side, the flavor text of its trigger event will reflect the Swaparamans' struggle when they were betrayed by their Fruitmaker cousins long ago. On Premanidi, you stumble upon the forgotten knowledge of Tanandam and convince your people to return to the great passage to fulfill Tanandam's will. The Swaparamans, still fearful and frightened of darkness and betrayal, are but willing to honor Tanandam's deeds and cross the borders of their promised garden, Nandanavana, to bring light to the galaxy and confront their nemesis, Gravesha. By the way, do you think this start is overpowered? We will cover the topic in the gameplay and balance section in this video, but first we switch to this big and awesome part of ship design in Galactic Civilizations IV. And just like before, we start with being amazed by the original artwork for the Swaparamans ships in Ascendancy Dos-Game 1995. There are 4 different hulls dominated by the colors yellow, blue and grey, with rings, cylinders, spheres, solar panels and tubes wired together with complicated machinery. Now I will adapt my own design approach to look nothing less ingenious and complex than the original, but on the other hand, I will add a more spiritual and radiant touch to it. But before we dash into the designer, we have to check the boxes in the Options Gameplay tab, enable Freeform Designer and show Starbases. Then we go to the faction customization screen, copy a pre-existent ship style and save it. Also this time I will configure a XML-based Swaparamans color preset, so that my exact color choices will already appear during the creation process within the in-game ship designer. We open the ship designer, select the copied ship style and our own Swaparamans color preset with blue and yellow colors. Because of the Swaparamans energy affinity, we will use circuits 2 and 3 as surface texture. For the texture modification, I will go with medium reflectivity and blown out lights for both primary and secondary materials. My ship design approach will double down on Swaparamans affinity to energy and light, and also include the spiritual importance of ring-like structures and circular motion. So basically, their ships will look like spinning batteries of holiness. I will first show you my design principles for the ship set at the most simple design, the scout probe Anantada. Starting with a cylindric body, I will attach these station joints, one for the front and one for the rear. On the latter, I will attach multiple cylinders for the engines, and on the former I will attach an oscillating arc construction, which reminds a bit of the original Ascendancy ship set. All spinally arranged parts will have rotation to create the sense of restlessness and movement that the Swaparamans direly need. For the front joint, I will negate the rotation and keep the bridge in its prior position. The construction ship design Tiyas Yinasu will follow the same principles, however, it will have several robotic arms for manipulation and these bright-looking battery packs. The supply ship Dananaya will have lots of cargo containers in a spanning arrangement and an even longer cylindric body. Our starting survey ship Arkan Besin will feature these spinning battery rings, and its design is an important baseline for all weaponized ships, since these battery rings will be the most common platform for mounting lasers, cannons and missile launchers. For the different weapon types, I used distinctive parts from the designer so you can recognize the cannons while looking at the frigate Banapala, as well as the lasers which are mounted on the dreadnought Anantrasmi. For the drone carriers, let me show you two models. The drones are attached to a big ring structure. For the drone carrier Teyas Bamsa, I have chosen a more civil design, while the assault carrier Yortikula has more military design approach. The drones are rotating with the invisible ring and do also oscillate in every direction to make them look dynamic. And finally, let us scroll through some fighters and big boy battleships from tiny to huge. On to the starbases. The most important starbase is of course the shipyard, because you look at it frequently in every game. The shipyard has to be hollow in the middle so that all of the models of ships being built can fit into the middle. Otherwise, it would look a bit odd. In the center of the shipyard, I crafted the circular construction rig with a spinning arrangement of robotic arms moving back and forth. This giant vertical rings is joined by two horizontal rings at the top and at the bottom. To really make the station shine, we add these bright glowing satellites. And now comes a part which made this model quite time consuming. A double horizontal ring around this construction, which features a diverse and complex array of joints and tubes. But it was definitely worth the effort because it looks so damn ingenuine and energetic. For the mining bases, I wanted something special, something like my Snowbendaumas mining base, so I wondered if I could make a freighter fly through this model from time to time. And I succeeded, at the cost of having a somewhat downsized model. The mining base reuses parts of the shipyard, but it is set up in a vertical tunnel shape so that the freighter can be moved through it on the invisible ring. And these are the other models of the mining base up to level 5. For the other bases I utilized one layout with a centerpiece, one horizontal and one vertical ring, and added different appendages and swarms of satellites to mark the differences between economy, culture and military. This ship set, however, I won't implement directly into the faction mod. Instead, you can download it as a standalone version and use it for the Swaparamans or other factions. On to the last chapter of this video, gameplay and balance. My highest and most important goal is, of course, to make the Swaparamans feel unique and organic in their playstyle. Their unique ability back in Ascendancy Dos-Game, however, was one of the less impactful. Doubling the energy of your fleets for one day would only make a difference if you had one major battle between two fleets later in the game. Our reboot of Swaparamans in GalCiv-4, however, grants the opportunity to make their background and the Great Passage count and notable throughout the game. The Swaparamans citizens are rather balanced. They have a very low resolve of -3 and get +1 bonus to intelligence, diligence and social. Their expectations is -7, which results in a small approval bonus, and they are fungal, which makes them prefer jungle worlds. On the faction ability side, they get +10% research and +15% influence, an initial bonus to movement speed and ship range. On the downside, they are poor invaders and intimidators. The two chosen abilities are Voyagers, which increases sensor range and movement points, and Resourceful, which unlocks Autoprinter and Communication Array for your capital planet. So far, the faction is comparable with the Terran Resistance. Wasn't it for the Swaparamans Costum Planetary improvement, the Tanandam Battery, and a Costume artifact power? First off, the building itself will grant a flat bonus of 0.5 antimatter income and a bonus for nearby produced ships of 10% ship range and +1 movement cap. For every level, the building will grant you 0.3 manufacturing, 0.1 antimatter, and a further bonus for locally produced ships of 5% ship range and 5% movement cap. Once you have built the Tanandam battery on your homeworld, you may also build Tanandam battery charges in the volume of 1, 3, or 5 at once. One charge will cost 30 production and 1 antimatter. It resets the movement points of a fleet and damages the fleet for 15% of their HP. The production volumes of 3 or 5 charges will give you a notable discount. I configured it that way to prevent the Swaparamans from being overpowered. Imagine yourself or your opponent out-colonizing everyone else at the game start, or out-maneuvering every defensive fleet in mid or late game and taking whole systems in one single turn. That's a problem. So it has to come at a cost, and therefore I've put the following costs into the game mechanic. You will have to build the project Quantum Battery Charge to get one single use of that power, occupying the production key of your planet. Second, you can only build the charge on your capital, where the Tanandam battery is. Third, you have to pay not only production time, but 1 antimatter for 1 charge. And finally, to punish you a bit for using it on large invasion fleets, your fleet will lose 15% of its current HP per use, because the structural integrity suffers from these forced death marches. Therefore, most players won't use the ability for combat ships and restrict the usage to civilian ships like colonizers or construction ships. Furthermore, this penalty outlines the great danger of Tanandam's Great Passage, risking hull breaches to get his people to the promised land. So the ability has a considerable debuff, and if you want to accelerate the movement of your colony ship early on, you will have to pay 1 whole turn of homeworld production, which can get you behind economically. So, to keep the ability interesting, you will also have the option to pay and produce 3 or 5 charges at once, along with a small discount. Especially this should make the ability viable once your homeworld has greater manufacturing. A favorable playstyle emerging from this ability could be the following. Anytime you can afford your homeworld to do so, you will squeeze one of these quantum battery charges into your production queue. When you spot interesting habitable planets you want to colonize, or resource depots you want to exploit, or trade routes you want to establish, you may then expand these charges to get your colony ships, your freighters, or your constructors there in one single turn. To exploit the ability the most, the player has to increase the movement point of his ships as much as possible. This includes flat bonus through technologies, design choices like unshielded thrusters, policies like unstable engines, or even starbase devices like hyperdrive accelerators. If the player plans to move his military fleets, Repair ships or technologies are necessary. Accelerating the scouting of probes could be interesting in particular moments, but it won't be worth in the long run, because it will be cheaper to simply build more probes instead of battery charges. An empire emerging from the strategy will be far spread out, and a few big fleets will be sufficient to cover most of the territory, because of the big flexibility the quantum battery charges grant you. To try out this faction mod, please download it from the Nexus website, linked below. Then download the chipset and follow the insta instructions. Now off with you, back into the Void Starfarer, lest the Great Passage is calling for Nanda Navanapala, keeper of the Promised Land, to launch the fleet and to do Tanandam's work.